Hi everyone, I'm Anthony Bactano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a classic review of The Roots' Things Fall Apart. Yes, it's Classics Week, and this is a classic review of the seminal 1999 album from Philadelphia's own The Roots. This was their fourth album at the time that it dropped, with the group's instrumentally dynamic approach to hip-hop in full effect already. The late 90s were a pretty transformative time for rap music, with new releases from Eminem, Jay-Z, DMX, and Dr. Dre pushing the genre to new heights. One of the Roots members at the time, Scott Storch, would be one of many who'd help usher in the bling era of the 2000s, producing some of the most club-friendly hits of that decade. So at the time, hip-hop was crossing over into another commercial renaissance, but listening to Things Fall Apart, you wouldn't know it. Which isn't to say the Roots were super obscure or too pretentious to be successful or accessible. I mean, the lead single from this thing, You Got Me, featuring Erykah Badu, did win a Grammy in the year 2000. I point this out to say mostly that the Roots have always been a group that's made music on their own terms. So when the wave of East Coast hip-hop they rode in on washed out, they stayed creative, conscious, and found new ways to push boundaries while staying true to those roots of jazz, soul, and boom bap that informed their earliest releases. Of course, Things Fall Apart plays an important role in that progression, as I'd say this was the band's most experimental and aesthetically adventurous record at the time, with multiple tracks here sporting odd and semi-lo-fi mixes, which results in a series of songs that are equally groovy, smooth, colorful, and raw. That is why Things Fall Apart has panned out to not just be a classic, but also, in my opinion, a timeless album. One that's aged so well it sounds as if it would still be relevant today when you consider that names like, again, Erykah Badu, D'Angelo, also Common, Mos Def, and Jay Dilla are in the mix on this thing. The sounds the Roots were immersed in on this record are still incredibly influential to the underground today, which is why, in my opinion, Things Fall Apart still sounds like sort of a modern record. But consider at the time this album dropped, hip-hop was pushing past 20 years as a genre, and I think the band begins to make a commentary on that itself with a cut of dialogue from Spike Lee's film Mo Better Blues, which at the kickoff of this record could most likely be interpreted a number of ways. But at least my read on it is that you have these acts within hip-hop music that are so desperate to change for commercial success, they no longer appeal to the black culture that they were born out of. But that doesn't mean the culture is becoming more separate from the music. If you create or make something or deliver something that is true to the roots and the soul and the reality of the genre, you will appeal to the audience that you want. Or at least that seems to be the framework the Roots are functioning under here. As it's clear listening to this, the Roots aren't just hip-hop musicians here, they're hip-hop evangelists. Also proponents of the genre as art, which I know seems like a silly thing to push forward these days where that is just so readily accepted, but in 1999 it wasn't so much the case. Speaking as someone who was a passionate music fan at the time, there were still a lot of prevailing narratives that it's not really music, it's just talking over a beat, which again, in the context of 2020 does sound silly, but Things Fall Apart still does make an incredible case for hip-hop as art. Now, Table of Contents Parts 1 and 2 feels almost like an extension of the intro. It's not a statement of intent as the introduction was, it's more of a taste of the record's musical DNA portrayed in two short motifs. The instrumental features these booming, blasted out beats, fuzzy keys, also vocals and bass hanging hard in the right channel. It's compressed, it's filthy, and completely sublime. But the following the next movement featuring DJ Jazzy Jeff is really where the band's musical credentials and also knack for hooks come into play. We have a fat beat, some tightly synced up bass and keys on this one, along with some eerie background vocals playing out a bum bum bum. The track simultaneously sounds hard and heavenly. While there are many straightforward elements to this track, Black Thought's heady and sometimes surreal lyricism is anything but. This directed to whoever in listening range, yo, the whole state of things in the world about to change, black rain falling from the sky looks strange, the ghetto is red hot, we steppin' on flames. Throughout this entire record, you really do have to give a second thought to nearly everything Black Thought is saying to process all of it. There's even a bit of hilarity hilarious self-commentary in regards to that on this track, where he tells the listener they need to get this on CD and stop rewinding it. CD humor. Yeah, CD humor. Then the following Step Into the Realm goes into a much darker direction with a beat and a refrain that feels like pure Wu-Tang worship. Those fragmented piano chords, the step into the realm, you're bound to get caught. It just sounds like a nightmarish take on something that would come off of 36 Chambers, while Black Thought's confrontational lyricism lands somewhere between a Raekwon and a Ghostface. So it's obviously calling back to a sound and a record that dropped just 6 years ago, but you have to appreciate that this was a part of the Roots' abilities and power as the group that they were. They could instrumentally recreate whatever the heck they wanted to. They didn't necessarily need to copy or sample directly whatever it is they wanted to pursue or emulate. And plus, given the ethos of the record so far, this is clearly an attempt to celebrate hip-hop's past artistic successes. It's also strange that the instrumental on this track repeatedly fades out, occasionally leaving the hook or Black Thought completely bare, but then it immediately comes back as if I'm waking up from a dream or starting one all over again. Next, the Spark maintains a pretty eerie vibe as well, though the instrumental does take a decidedly smoky and psychedelic approach, which is enhanced by the late Malik B's rhymes being slightly obscured in the mix with a touch of echo. Love how intricate this one is between the groovy beat, grimy guitars, tense keys, and chorus of oohs, which undergo some pretty jazzy transitions, setting the stage really for Malik to drop these bars about being on edge, feeling tense, because at any moment he might need to respond in kind to some MC that's testing his mettle. Following this, things enter into catchier territory on Dynamite. Dynamite. There is an infectious refrain on this one, amazing bass line too, and the set of chords being played on this track, is that also the bass, like with a lot of treble on it, a guitar? I'm not entirely sure, but either way, the chord progression on this one is sick. Also, the sour tone they're being played with just makes them pop in the mix wonderfully. Really, I think this is a piece of jazz rap that can rival nearly anything else in the genre, even some of the best tracks in the Tribe catalog, especially when you consider the lyrical chemistry between Black Thought and Rahani Syed on the track's two thick verses. Meanwhile, without a doubt featuring Lady B grooves almost like a precursor to a beat that the Neptunes would do for Clips or something in the 2000s. And I know Pharrell and I know Chad had some pretty big tracks out around this time, but from what I understand, not anything that was pushing exactly this type of very funky, quirky beat with a lot of metallic perks. But most likely at the end of the day, what the Roots were doing here was just kind of throwing it back to the more rudimentary elements of hip-hop's sound in the 80s. Black Thought's lyrics say as much, plus this is also the kind of thing that even the cool kids picked up on in their earliest releases. But yeah, between the DJ scratches and charismatic group choruses, this is really hip-hop at its most raw and appealing. Ain't Saying Nothing New is a lot more melodic by comparison, with the instrumental undergoing these fantastic transitions from weepy guitar loops to these combos of jazz fusion bass and psychedelic reverse tones that come off like the band is doing some weird tape music stuff. Dice Raw, another one of the Roots lyrical alumni, also adds a fantastically rugged energy to the track. The collaborative vibes continue on to Double Trouble, where Black Thought is set against Mos Def, who delivers what I think is the best feature on the entire record, really a show of why he was one of the best rappers of his era. The wordplay, the creativity on the flow side of things, how effortless it all sounds, the charisma, and on top of it, just the eccentricity too. Then the following Act 2 features a huge guest verse from Chicago legend Common. One of the more low-key and cerebral instrumentals on this record lands here too, with what sounds like these dueling synth or muted horn lines playing off each other in both channels, also a series of gently scattered vocals that are chopped and placed in various spots through the mix for a sort of disorienting but dreamy effect, plus all the closely mic'd ad-libs that kick the entire song off. It's kind of like hip-hop ASMR. Then Common, in pure Common fashion, raps about life, the cosmos, kind of learning the ropes of hip-hop, learning to love hip-hop and become great at this thing that put him where he is today. It is just a beautiful and serene moment on this very versatile record. The variety continues onto 100% Dundee that features a fat beatboxed beat, plus some really psychedelic drippy keys all over the mix as well. It's kind of funny, no matter how abstract or strange Kamal Gray and company seem to go on the instrumental side of things, Black Thought and whoever else is on the track too just go so hard it sounds aggressive and killer and almost threatening anyway. Adrenaline, featuring Dice Raw and Beanie Sigel, I'd say for its time is one of the more commercially, I guess, friendly songs on the record, with some tight synth bass, quirky earworm refrains, and some classical piano hits too. It sounds almost like something Dr. Dre would have produced, but with more of a grimy East Coast twist on it. From here, I would say the record moves into a strong third act, starting off with the Grammy-winning You Got Me, which lyrically Black Thought is detailing this romantic connection that he keeps coming back to, even though life and music and performing constantly takes him out of frame. From there, it's the instrumental really doing a lot of the work between the lush strings and beautiful guitar arpeggios. Erykah Badu's hook on this one too is stunning. There's also a strange outro on this track featuring a huge rhythmic switch up that brings things almost into IDM territory. I am not kidding. And yet it still kind of works. Then the following Don't See Us features some of the coolest jazz embellishments on the instrumental side from this entire record. And then to finish things off before we get to the hidden song on the LP, which was you know, sort of a tradition or a popular thing back in the day when you could throw a lot of space in between the last song and, again, a hidden track on a CD. But yes, on this final track we have a moving spoken word and poetry performance from Ursula Rucker, the return to Innocence Lost, whose lyrics detail very deeply this father's abuse, physical and sexual, toward his family, and how that ends up creating this cycle of violence and addiction. Between Ursula's words and the strange keys throughout the track, it is an incredibly heavy and intense way to end this album off, and really tries to hit the audience with the gravity of everything that the record is trying to touch down on content-wise, which Black Thought and all the guests on this LP are just fantastic vehicles for. So yes, that is everything I would like to say and note about this project. I think wonderful record, amazing record, in my opinion, a classic record, one fantastic song after another. Some of the Roots' best work, but honestly, the band's catalog is full of amazing records that are nearly flawless from front to back, and I encourage anybody who is watching this review, might enjoy just one or two albums, might be hearing this for the first time, listen to the other records in their catalog, whether that be Do You Want More, or Phrenology, or How I Got Over, or Undone. There are so many great LPs that the Roots have to their name. And again, that is due to their incredible musical and lyrical talent, their versatility over the years, just everyone they've worked with from one era to the next, and just all the evolution that they've undergone over this long course of time from when they started in the late 80s to today. So hell yeah, classic record, amazing record, love it. Transition, have you given this LP a listen? Do you love it? Do you hate it? You should love it. It's a frickin' classic. Over here next to my head is another classic review that you can check out. Hit that up, or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, The Roots, Things Fall Apart Forever.